My name is Naomi, and I'm 56 years old. I never imagined my son would exclude me from his wedding day after all we've been through together. But the real shock came 3 days after his secret ceremony when Andrew called asking for the keys to my Malibu house for his honeymoon. I just smiled, hung up, and prepared a special wedding gift that would teach him about respect and boundaries. If you're a parent, you might understand my heartbreak and the difficult choice I had to make. Let me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear how I handled this painful situation. The moment Andrew was placed in my arms 28 years ago, I knew I would do anything for him. His father, Thomas, didn't share my devotion. When Andrew was just 3 years old, Thomas announced he had outgrown our family and walked out the door with his suitcases packed. He left behind mortgage payments, credit card debt, and a devastated little boy who cried for his daddy every night. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming back?" Andrew would ask, his small voice cracking with emotion. "I don't know, sweetheart." I'd answer truthfully, holding him close. "But I promise I'll always be here for you." And I kept that promise through every hardship that followed. With Thomas providing only sporadic child support, I had to reinvent myself quickly. I took any job I could find, waitressing in the mornings, administrative work in the afternoons, and online data entry late into the night after Andrew was asleep. Those early years were a blur of exhaustion, but whenever I felt like giving up, I'd look at my son's sleeping face and find renewed strength. "We're going to be okay, buddy," I'd whisper to him even though he couldn't hear me. "Mommy's going to make sure of it." My background in business administration eventually helped me land a position with a real estate company. I started as an assistant, but quickly discovered I had a natural talent for sales. My boss, Marianne, took me under her wing, mentoring me through the process of getting my real estate license. "You have something special, Naomi," she told me. "You connect with people in a way that can't be taught." Within 5 years, I had built a solid client base and was earning enough to move us from our tiny apartment to a modest house in a good school district. Andrew thrived in our new neighborhood, making friends and excelling in school. Each milestone felt like a personal victory. I had created stability for my son despite starting from nothing. When Andrew was 12, I took the biggest risk of my career by opening my own real estate agency. Those first 2 years were terrifying, but my previous clients trusted me, and referrals started coming in steadily. By the time Andrew entered high school, my business was flourishing beyond my wildest expectations. It was during this period of financial success that I purchased the Malibu property, a beautiful 3-bedroom beach house with panoramic ocean views. I remember the day I got the keys. I picked Andrew up from school without telling him where we were going. "Mom, where are we driving to? I'm missing basketball practice," he complained as we headed down the Pacific Coast Highway. "Just trust me for another 15 minutes, I said, barely containing my excitement. When we pulled into the driveway, Andrew looked confused. "Whose house is this?" he asked. I dangled the keys in front of him. "Ours." His eyes widened in disbelief, and then he was running through every room shouting in excitement when he discovered the direct access to the beach. That evening, we sat on the sand, watching the sunset, eating takeout pizza. "This is the best day ever, Mom," he said, leaning his head against my shoulder. "You're amazing, you know that." The Malibu house became our special place. We spent every possible weekend and holiday there. Andrew learned to surf on that beach, had his first summer parties with friends on that deck, and even practiced his college application essays while sitting on the window seat overlooking the ocean. It was where we retreated after Thomas failed to show up for Andrew's high school graduation, and where we celebrated when Andrew got accepted to Stanford with a partial scholarship. I worked extra hours and took on additional clients to cover the remaining tuition costs, determined that my son wouldn't start his adult life burdened with student loans. When he expressed interest in studying business and economics, I couldn't have been prouder. Every sacrifice had been worth it to see him flourishing, Throughout college, Andrew called regularly and came home for holidays and summer breaks. Our relationship remained strong, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. He would often tell me how his friends envied our close bond, as many of them had complicated relationships with their parents. "My roommate Brad hasn't spoken to his mom in months," he told me once during his junior year. "It makes me realize how lucky I am to have you." After graduation, Andrew moved to San Francisco to work for a financial consulting firm. Despite the distance, we maintained our connection through weekly phone calls and regular visits. For his 25th birthday, I flew up to San Francisco and took him to dinner at an upscale restaurant with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge. "You didn't have to do all this, Mom," he said, looking slightly embarrassed by the extravagance. "I wanted to," I replied. "I'm so proud of the man you've become, Andrew. You deserve to be celebrated." He raised his glass to mine. "To the woman who made it all possible." It was during this dinner that Andrew first mentioned Jessica. She was a new colleague at his firm, apparently brilliant and ambitious. I was delighted to hear excitement in his voice when he talked about her. "You should bring her down to visit sometime," I suggested. "The Malibu house is perfect for a weekend getaway." Andrew's face lit up. "She'd love that, Mom. Thanks." Little did I know that this casual suggestion would mark the beginning of a painful transformation in our relationship, one that would ultimately lead to the most difficult decision I'd ever have to make as a mother. The first time I met Jessica was 3 months later. Andrew called on a Wednesday evening, his voice unusually hesitant. "Mom, would it be okay if I brought Jessica to the Malibu house this weekend? I really want you two to meet." My heart swelled with happiness. "Of course, I'll prepare the guest room and make my special lasagna." "Actually," Andrew interrupted, "Jessica's vegetarian, and she's really into clean eating." This was my first glimpse of how things would change. I quickly adjusted my plans. "No problem. I'll make a vegetable paella instead and get some fresh salad ingredients." When they arrived that Friday evening, I was struck by Jessica's physical beauty. She was tall and slender, with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and an elegant way of carrying herself. Her handshake was firm but brief, her smile polite but not warm. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Reynolds," she said. "Andrew talks about you all the time." "Please call me Naomi," I replied, trying to establish an informal, friendly atmosphere. "I've been looking forward to meeting you too." As I showed them around, I noticed how Jessica's eyes critically scanned each room, her expression revealing subtle disapproval. When we reached the living room, with its comfortable but well-worn furniture, she turned to Andrew and whispered something that made him look embarrassed. "This place has so much character," she said to me in a tone that suggested character wasn't necessarily a compliment. "When was it last renovated?" "About 10 years ago," I answered, feeling suddenly self-conscious about the faded curtains and the small water stain on the ceiling from last winter's heavy rains. "It's my little paradise, so I haven't felt the need to change much." She responded. "Well, Andrew mentioned there's a direct path to the beach that sounds lovely." During dinner, I tried to engage Jessica in conversation, asking about her family and background. She answered with rehearsed precision, revealing that she came from a wealthy Connecticut family, had attended an elite private school, followed by Princeton, and had worked briefly on Wall Street before moving to the West Coast. "My parents wanted me to stay in New York and take a position at my father's investment firm," she explained. "But I needed to establish myself independently." When I asked if she visited her family often, a shadow crossed her face. "We have different priorities. They don't quite understand my choices." Throughout the weekend, I noticed how Andrew deferred to Jessica in small but significant ways, checking with her before answering my questions, adjusting his opinions to align with hers, even changing the way he spoke. My confident, thoughtful son seemed diminished in her presence, eager for her approval. On Saturday morning, I suggested we have breakfast on the deck to enjoy the ocean view. Jessica frowned slightly. Actually, I already did my morning workout and protein shake. I don't really do breakfast. Andrew, who had always loved our big weekend breakfasts, quickly said, "Yeah, I'm not that hungry either, Mom." Later that day, I overheard them talking in the guest room, their voices carrying through the partially open door. "Your mom is exactly as I imagined," Jessica was saying. "Very suburban mom energy." "She's always been a little old-fashioned," Andrew replied, his tone apologetic. "But she's incredibly supportive." "I can see that. Maybe a bit too supportive. Don't you think it's strange how involved she still is in your life?" My heart sank, hearing Andrew's response. "Maybe you're right. I guess I never really thought about it that way." Over the next few months, Andrew's calls became less frequent. When we did speak, our conversations felt superficial, with Andrew seeming distracted and in a hurry to end the call. He canceled 2 planned visits to the Malibu house, citing work commitments, though his social media showed photos of him and Jessica at wine country resorts during those same weekends. 6 months after our first meeting, I invited them both for Thanksgiving, but Andrew called to decline. "We're actually spending Thanksgiving with Jessica's colleague Stephanie. She's hosting a Friendsgiving thing." "But we always spend Thanksgiving together," I said, unable to hide my disappointment. "It's our tradition." "Mom, I'm 30 years old. I need to create my own traditions now." "Of course you do," I said, swallowing the hurt. "But maybe you could stop by for dessert. I'll make your favorite pecan pie." There was an uncomfortable pause before Andrew responded. "Jessica doesn't really like pecan pie, and Stephanie's place is across town, so—" That Christmas, I received a generic card signed by both of them and a gift certificate to a department store. In previous years, Andrew had always given me thoughtful personal gifts. Books by authors he knew I enjoyed, a framed photo of us from a memorable trip, a beautiful scarf he'd noticed me admiring months earlier. When I called to thank them, Jessica answered Andrew's phone. "Oh, the gift certificate was my idea," she said brightly. "I figured you could use some new things for the house." In February, I made one last attempt to bridge the growing gap between us. I called Andrew and expressed my concerns directly. "I feel like we're drifting apart and I miss you. If I've done something to upset you or Jessica, I'd like to know so I can make it right." "Nothing's wrong, Mom," he insisted. "I'm just busy with work and building a life with Jessica. You need to understand that you can't be the center of my world anymore." "I've never tried to be the center of your world, Andrew. I just want to be part of it." "See, this is exactly what Jessica talks about. You're being emotionally manipulative." His voice had taken on a harsh tone I'd never heard before. "You need to let go and give me space." I was stunned into silence, tears streaming down my face. After 28 years of putting him first, of building my life around making him happy and successful, I was being accused of manipulation for simply wanting to maintain our relationship. "I understand," I finally managed to say. "I'll give you the space you need." "Thanks, Mom," he replied, his tone immediately lighter. "That's all I'm asking for." As I hung up the phone, I wondered if this was the natural progression of a mother-son relationship, this painful separation, this redefining of boundaries. Or was there something more troubling happening, something I couldn't yet name, but could feel in my bones? Spring arrived, bringing with it longer days, and the sweet scent of jasmine outside my window. I had been respecting Andrew's request for space, calling less frequently, and making peace with our new, more distant relationship. I focused on my business, joined a book club, and started taking weekend hiking trips with my friend Diane, who was also navigating an empty nest after her twins left for college. "They come back," Diane assured me during one of our hikes in Topanga Canyon. "Maybe not in the same way, but they do come back. They just need to figure out who they are apart from us first." I clung to this hope, trying to see Andrew's distance as a necessary phase rather than a permanent loss. Then came the day that shattered this comforting narrative. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late April when I ran into Michael, one of Andrew's college friends, at the grocery store. I hadn't seen him in years, but he greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Reynolds, it's great to see you. Are you excited about the wedding?" I froze, my hand still reaching for a container of blueberries. "Wedding?" Michael's face fell, realization dawning in his eyes. "Oh no, I just assumed you knew. Andrew and Jessica are getting married in June. I got the invitation last week." The store seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the edge of the produce display to steady myself. "I'm so sorry," Michael stammered. "I shouldn't have said anything." No, I managed to say, forcing a smile. "It's fine. I must have forgotten the exact date. June is coming up so quickly." Michael looked unconvinced but played along. "Right, exactly. Well, it was nice seeing you. I should get going." I abandoned my half-filled shopping cart and drove home in a daze. Once inside, I called Andrew, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial his number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again. On my fourth attempt, he finally answered. "Mom, what's wrong? Why are you calling so many times?" "I just ran into Michael," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "He mentioned your wedding in June." There was a long silence. "We were going to tell you," Andrew finally said. When, the day after, "Don't be dramatic, Mom. We're keeping it very small, just close friends. And I'm not considered close family." Another pause. "Jessica wanted to keep it intimate." "I see." I took a deep breath. "And when exactly is this intimate wedding taking place?" "June 15th, at the Ritz-Carlton in Half Moon Bay." "The Ritz-Carlton doesn't sound very small, Andrew." "Look, Mom, I knew you'd make this difficult. This is exactly why we didn't tell you sooner." His voice had taken on that defensive tone that had become increasingly common in our conversations. "It's our wedding, and we get to decide who's there." The pain of his words was physical, like a blow to my chest. "I understand it's your decision," I said quietly. "I just thought, after everything we've been through together, you'd want me there on your wedding day." "Jessica thinks it's healthier for us to establish clear boundaries from the beginning of our marriage. Her therapist agrees that parents can often complicate the formation of a new family unit." I wanted to scream, to remind him of all the times I had put his needs first, of how I had worked 3 jobs to keep him in a good school district, of how I had gone without new clothes for years so he could have the latest sneakers his friends were wearing. Instead, I said nothing. "Mom, are you still there?" "Yes," I replied. "I'm still here. I've always been here, Andrew." "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." He sounded annoyed now. "I've got to go. Jessica and I are meeting with the caterer." After he hung up, I sat motionless on my couch for hours. As night fell, I finally moved to my computer and, against my better judgment, looked up Jessica's social media accounts. Though we weren't connected, many of her posts were public. I scrolled through until I found mentions of the wedding. What I discovered confirmed my worst suspicions. This was not a small, intimate gathering. Jessica had posted about selecting a venue that could accommodate all 220 of our closest friends and family. There were photos of elaborate floral arrangements, custom invitations, bridesmaids' dress fittings. One post thanked her parents for making our dream wedding possible, the same parents she had claimed to be distant from. I found a wedding website with their registry, which included items costing thousands of dollars. And then, most painfully, I saw a photo of Jessica with her mother at a bridal salon captioned, "Found my perfect dress with my perfect mom, #blessed." The magnitude of the rejection was overwhelming. Not only was I excluded from my only child's wedding, but I was being deliberately lied to about the nature of the event. Every mother I knew had dreamed of seeing their child get married, had imagined playing a role in that special day. Instead, I would be sitting alone at home while my son pledged his life to a woman who had systematically removed me from his life. I sent Andrew an email that night, trying once more to reach whatever part of him might still value our relationship. Dear Andrew, I'm deeply hurt by your decision to exclude me from your wedding. I've always respected your choices and supported your independence, but this feels like more than establishing healthy boundaries. It feels like erasure of our relationship and the life we built together. I love you unconditionally, but love also requires truth and respect. Please reconsider. Love, Mom. Days passed with no response. I left voicemails that went unreturned. I even sent a text directly to Jessica, congratulating her on the upcoming wedding and expressing my wish to be included in some small way, even if just at the rehearsal dinner. She responded with a brief, "Thank you for your understanding during this busy time." As June 15th approached, I vacillated between anger and deep sadness. I considered showing up uninvited, but couldn't bear the thought of being turned away or causing a scene that would further damage my relationship with Andrew. Instead, on the day of the wedding, I went to the Malibu house alone, seeking comfort in the place that held so many happy memories of our life together. From my deck overlooking the ocean, I watched the sun set and thought about Andrew as a little boy building sandcastles on the beach below, as a teenager bringing his first girlfriend to walk along the shore, as a young man sitting beside me with dreams of his future. I wondered if that future had ever included me. Later that night, back at my main residence, I allowed myself to look at the photos appearing on social media. The ceremony had indeed been lavish. Jessica in a designer gown, Andrew handsome in his tuxedo, smiling broadly at his bride. There were photos of Jessica dancing with her father, hugging her mother, surrounded by family members who had apparently made the cut for this intimate celebration. The pain was searing, but as I scrolled through image after image of this milestone event, I had been barred from witnessing something shifted inside me. A lifetime of prioritizing Andrew's happiness over my own had left me vulnerable to this kind of exploitation. For the first time, I began to consider that perhaps the best way to love my son now was to love myself enough to establish my own boundaries. This revelation would be tested sooner than I expected when my phone rang 3 days after the wedding, displaying Andrew's name on the screen. I stared at my ringing phone, Andrew's name flashing on the screen. For a moment, I considered not answering. What could he possibly have to say now that would heal the wound of being excluded from his wedding? But 28 years of maternal instinct won out. I took a deep breath and swiped to accept the call. "Hello, Andrew." I kept my voice neutral, neither warm nor cold. "Mom?" There was no apology in his tone, no acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. Instead, he sounded oddly businesslike. "How are you?" "I'm managing," I replied truthfully. "Congratulations on your wedding. The photos looked lovely." "Yeah, it was perfect. Jessica's parents really went all out." He paused awkwardly. "So listen, Mom. The reason I'm calling is that Jessica and I are planning our honeymoon." I waited, saying nothing. "We've been thinking about the Malibu house," he continued. "It would be perfect for what we want. Private right on the beach and free." The audacity of his request momentarily robbed me of speech. After excluding me from the most important day of his life, he was now calling to use my home for his honeymoon. "We're already married, Mom," he added when I didn't immediately respond. "Send me the key to the house in Malibu." It wasn't a question or a request. It was a demand spoken with the entitlement of someone who had always received what they wanted. I felt a chill run through me at the realization that this was who my son had become. "When were you thinking of using the house?" I asked, playing for time as I processed his request. "We'd want to arrive this Friday and stay for 2 weeks. Jessica has already arranged for her assistant to pick up the keys tomorrow." That's very short notice, Andrew. Well, we've been busy with wedding planning, he replied, as if this explained everything. So can you make sure the house is ready? Clean sheets, stocked fridge, that sort of thing? Before I could respond, I heard Jessica's voice in the background, then the sound of the phone being passed. Naomi? Hi, it's Jessica. Her voice held the false brightness I had come to recognize. We're so excited about using the beach house. I've actually already started making plans for a little gathering there next weekend. Just a few friends from the wedding. Nothing wild, I promise. I closed my eyes, trying to maintain my composure. Jessica, I wasn't aware you were planning to host guests at my home. Oh, it's no trouble, she said dismissively. Just 8 or 10 people. We'll take care of everything. I heard the phone being passed back to Andrew. So, that works for you, right, Mom? You'll need to be out by Thursday evening so the cleaning service can come through on Friday morning before we arrive. The assumption that I would not only provide my home, but also vacate it and arrange cleaning services for them was the final straw. In that moment, I saw with painful clarity how Jessica and Andrew viewed me. Not as a person with feelings and boundaries, but as a resource to be used and discarded according to their convenience. Yet even with this realization, years of putting Andrew first made it difficult to respond with the firmness the situation demanded. So instead, I simply said, "Let me think about it and I'll get back to you." What's there to think about? Andrew sounded genuinely confused. It's just sitting there empty most of the time anyway. I'll call you tomorrow, I said, then ended the call before he could protest further. I sat in silence afterward, my thoughts swirling. The house in Malibu represented so much more than a valuable piece of real estate. It was the physical manifestation of everything I had worked for, the reward for years of sacrifice and determination. It was where Andrew and I had built our most precious memories, where we had healed from disappointments and celebrated triumphs. And now he wanted to use it for his honeymoon with a woman who had orchestrated my exclusion from his life, as if the house, like me, existed merely to serve his needs without recognition or gratitude. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel not just hurt, but anger. Righteous, clarifying anger that cut through the fog of maternal self-sacrifice I had been living in for decades. I picked up my phone and called my oldest friend, Diane. They want to use the Malibu house for their honeymoon, I told her after explaining about the wedding. They didn't even invite me to the ceremony, but they expect me to hand over the keys to my home and then disappear. Oh, Naomi, Diane sighed. That's beyond insensitive. That's cruel. Am I overreacting? Is this what mothers are supposed to do? Just keep giving, no matter how they're treated? Absolutely not, Diane said firmly. Loving your child doesn't mean being their doormat. You taught Andrew values like respect and consideration. It sounds like he's forgotten those lessons. Her words resonated with something deep inside me. I had indeed raised Andrew to be respectful and considerate. Somewhere along the way, perhaps under Jessica's influence, perhaps due to his own choices, he had abandoned those values in our relationship. What are you going to do? Diane asked. I surprised myself with the clarity of my response. I'm not giving them the house. Not like this, not under these circumstances. Good for you, she said. Standing up for yourself isn't the same as not loving him. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do, showing them that relationships require mutual respect. After our call, I spent the evening looking through old photo albums tracing Andrew's journey from tiny infant to grown man. I reflected on the mother I had been, sometimes too accommodating perhaps, but always acting from a place of deep love. I had done my best, made mistakes certainly, but I had nothing to apologize for in how I had raised my son. As I closed the last album, I knew what I needed to do. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about teaching my son a final, crucial lesson about respect and consequences. It was about honoring myself after decades of putting his needs first. I went to my desk and began writing a letter, the first piece of what would become my wedding gift to Andrew and Jessica. Not the gift they expected, certainly not the gift they wanted, but perhaps the gift they needed most. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. After making a strong cup of coffee, I called my travel agent and booked a flight to Los Angeles for that afternoon. Then I contacted John Parker, the property manager who looked after the Malibu house when I wasn't in residence. "John, I need to discuss some changes regarding the beach house," I explained. "I'll be arriving today. Could we meet tomorrow morning?" "Of course, Ms. Reynolds. Is everything all right?" "It will be," I assured him. "I'm just making some long overdue decisions." Next, I called my attorney, Margaret Wilson, who had handled my real estate transactions for years. "Margaret, I need some paperwork drawn up regarding the Malibu property. How quickly can you prepare a standard long-term lease agreement?" "For a good client like you, I can have it ready by tomorrow afternoon. Are you renting out the beach house?" "Yes," I replied. "It's time." My final call was to Emily and James Chen, a lovely couple with 2 young children who had expressed interest in renting a beach property several months ago when they came into my real estate office. At the time, I hadn't been ready to rent out my beloved retreat, but circumstances had changed. "Emily, it's Naomi Reynolds from Coastal Horizon Realty. You mentioned being interested in a long-term beach rental. Is that still the case?" Emily's excitement was palpable. "Absolutely. We've been looking for months, but nothing suitable has come on the market. I have a 3-bedroom in Malibu that might be perfect for your family. It would be available starting next week, minimum 1-year lease." "That sounds incredible. Could we see it?" "Of course. I'll be there tomorrow. How about we meet at the property around 2 o'clock? With these arrangements in place, I packed a small suitcase and headed to the airport. As my plane descended into Los Angeles, I gazed out at the Pacific Ocean glittering in the distance, feeling a mixture of sadness and resolution. The Malibu house had been my sanctuary, my reward to myself for years of hard work. Renting it out wasn't what I had planned, but it was the right decision now, both practically and symbolically. The next morning, I met with John Parker at a cafe near the beach. He had managed the property since I purchased it and had always been reliable and discreet. "I've decided to rent the house on a long-term basis," I explained. "I have potential tenants coming to view it this afternoon." John nodded thoughtfully. "It's a good time for rentals in this area. Property values are at a premium and you could command a substantial monthly income." "That's what I'm counting on," I replied. "But before the new tenants move in, I'd like to do a thorough inventory and take photos of the current condition of the house and furnishings." After our meeting, I drove to the beach house, feeling a tightness in my chest as I turned into the familiar driveway. Inside, everything was exactly as I had left it during my last visit. Andrew's high school graduation photo still held a place of honor on the mantel. The collection of seashells we had gathered together over the years still arranged on the windowsill. The bookshelf still containing the novels we had read during rainy weekends. I moved from room to room, taking photos with my phone. Detailed shots of the furniture, the artwork, the kitchen appliances, the view from each window. These images would serve a practical purpose for the rental agreement, but they were also my way of preserving this chapter of my life before turning the page. In Andrew's old bedroom, which I had maintained for his visits even after he moved away for college, I lingered longest. The walls were still adorned with his swimming trophies and framed concert posters. The desk where he had studied for his SATs still held the lamp I had bought him to reduce eye strain. I sat on the edge of his bed, running my hand over the navy blue comforter he had selected as a teenager. "I'm not doing this to punish you," I said aloud to the empty room. "I'm doing this because we both need to understand where we stand now." Emily and James arrived promptly at 2 o'clock, their excitement evident as they explored the property. Their children, ages 6 and 8, ran straight to the windows overlooking the beach, pressing their small hands against the glass in wonder. "This is beyond perfect," Emily breathed, taking in the open living area with its panoramic ocean view. We've been dreaming of a place exactly like this. James nodded in agreement. The commute to my new position at UCLA Medical Center would be reasonable from here, and the schools in this district are excellent. I watched their children discover the path leading down to the beach, their joyful exclamations carrying back to us on the breeze. There was something healing about seeing a young family appreciate the house in the way it deserved to be appreciated. If you're interested, I can have the lease agreement ready for review by tomorrow, I told them. We're definitely interested, James confirmed. When would the property be available? Next Monday, I replied. I'll need a few days to prepare the house for your arrival. After they left, I drove to Margaret's office to review the lease agreement she had prepared. It was straightforward. A 1-year lease with an option to renew fair market rent with a security deposit standard clauses about maintenance and alterations to the property. Are you sure about the timeline? Margaret asked as I signed my copy of the agreement. This is happening very quickly. I'm sure, I said, my signature flowing across the bottom of the page with a finality that felt right. It's time for changes all around. Back at the beach house, I began the bittersweet task of packing up the personal items I wanted to keep. Photo albums, special mementos, the antique clock that had been a housewarming gift to myself when I first bought the property. I worked methodically through the evening, boxing up my history in this place, making space for a new family to create their own memories within these walls. As I sealed the final box, my phone rang. It was Andrew again. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text message appeared. Mom, we need to finalize the house plans for the weekend. My assistant will come by tomorrow for the keys. Please confirm. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat down at the dining table and finished writing the letter I had started the night before. It was the hardest letter I had ever written. Honest about my pain, but free from bitterness, clear about my boundaries, but not vindictive. It explained my decision about the house, and more importantly, about our relationship going forward. When I finished, I read it through twice, made a few final edits, then printed it on the cream-colored stationery I kept in the desk drawer. The next day, I met with Emily and James again to sign the lease agreement. Their excitement was infectious, and for the first time since learning about Andrew's wedding, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. This house would once again be filled with family laughter and new traditions. Just not my family, not my traditions. After finalizing the rental arrangements, I purchased a beautiful gift box and tissue paper from a boutique in town. I placed my letter inside along with copies of the lease agreement, the inventory photos of the house, and a check for a modest amount. Not the extravagant wedding gift I might have given had I been included in the celebration, but enough to acknowledge the occasion. On the card attached to the outside of the box, I wrote simply, "To Andrew and Jessica, wishing you both a lifetime of mutual respect and happiness. Love, Mom." As I drove back to San Francisco that evening, I felt lighter somehow, as if I had set down a burden I had been carrying for too long. I was not naive enough to believe that my wedding gift would be well received, but I was at peace with my decision. For perhaps the first time since becoming a mother, I had prioritized my own dignity and emotional well-being without qualification or apology. 3 days after the wedding, exactly as planned, I stood outside Andrew and Jessica's downtown apartment building gift box in hand. I had timed my visit for late afternoon when I knew they would likely be home based on their regular schedules. My heart pounded as I pressed the intercom button. Jessica's voice came through the speaker. "Yes, who is it?" "It's Naomi, Andrew's mother. I have a wedding gift to drop off." There was a long pause before the door buzzed open. I took the elevator to the 10th floor and found Jessica waiting in the doorway of their apartment, her expression a mixture of surprise and wariness. "Andrew isn't home," she said, not inviting me in. "He's at the gym." "That's all right," I replied, holding out the gift box. "This is for both of you. I wanted to congratulate you on your marriage in person." Jessica took the box with reluctance as if it might contain something dangerous. "Thank you. I'll make sure Andrew knows you stopped by." "Please do," I said with a calm I didn't entirely feel. "And Jessica, I truly do wish you both happiness." I turned and walked back toward the elevator, feeling her eyes on me the entire way. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of her still standing in the doorway, looking down at the box with confusion. What happened next would be out of my hands. I had said what needed to be said, done what needed to be done. The rest would be up to Andrew, and to me learning to live with the new reality of our relationship, whatever form it might take. I drove home from Andrew and Jessica's apartment building in a state of strange calm. The Los Angeles traffic moved around me in its usual chaotic rhythm, but inside my car was a bubble of quiet certainty. I had delivered my wedding gift, spoken my truth through the letter it contained, and now all I could do was wait. It wasn't until the following morning that my phone rang, Andrew's name flashing on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "What the hell, Mom?" His voice was tight with fury. "Is this some kind of joke?" "Good morning, Andrew," I replied evenly. "I assume you received my gift." "Gift? You call this a gift? You rented out the Malibu house without even telling me? It's my house, Andrew. I don't need your permission to rent it." "But you knew we were planning to use it for our honeymoon." His voice rose in incredulity. "We had everything arranged." "No, you had everything arranged," I corrected him gently. "You never asked if the house was available. You simply demanded the keys as if my property and my feelings were irrelevant." "This is so typical," he sputtered. "You're punishing me because you're upset about the wedding. This is exactly the kind of emotional manipulation Jessica warned me about." The accusation stung, but I had anticipated it. "This isn't punishment, Andrew. It's a consequence. When you chose to exclude me from your wedding, a wedding I learned about from a chance encounter at the grocery store, you made a clear statement about my place in your life. I'm simply acknowledging that statement and adjusting accordingly." "So you're admitting this is revenge?" "No," I said firmly. "This is self-respect. For years, I've put your needs and happiness above my own. I worked 3 jobs to give you opportunities I never had. I supported every dream, celebrated every achievement, and loved you through every mistake. But I cannot and will not be used as a convenient resource while being discarded when it suits you." There was a moment of silence before Andrew spoke again, his voice lower but still tense. "You don't understand. The wedding was complicated. Jessica's parents were paying for everything, and they had certain expectations." "And what were your expectations, Andrew? Did you expect that you could cut me out of the most significant day of your life and then have me eagerly hand over my home for your honeymoon? Did that seem reasonable to you?" Another silence stretched between us. I heard muffled voices, Andrew speaking to Jessica away from the phone. Then Jessica's voice came clearly through the line. "Naomi, this is completely unacceptable," she said, her tone clipped and cold. "Andrew told me you've always been generous about sharing the beach house. Why would you suddenly rent it out now, knowing we needed it, unless you were trying to be vindictive?" "Jessica," I responded calmly, "I've never met anyone who needed a specific luxury beachfront property for their honeymoon. There are thousands of beautiful places you could go. This isn't about need, it's about entitlement." "We are not entitled," she snapped. "But Andrew is your son. Doesn't that count for anything?" "It counted for everything," I said, my voice finally betraying a hint of the emotion I was containing. "For 28 years, it was the center of my universe, but that relationship goes both ways. When you both decided I wasn't important enough to witness your marriage, you redefined what we are to each other." I heard the phone being passed back to Andrew. "Mom," he said, his voice now attempting a conciliatory tone. "I understand you're hurt about the wedding. I probably should have handled that differently. but this lease is for a whole year. You're seriously not going to let us use the house for even a few days. Can't you ask the tenants to delay moving in? The Chens have already signed the lease and paid their deposit. They're a lovely family with young children who are excited about their new home. I won't disappoint them. So you'll disappoint your own son instead. The anger was creeping back into his voice. That's just great, Mom. Really maternal of you. I felt a familiar pang at his words, the instinctive maternal guilt that had influenced so many of my decisions over the years. But this time, I recognized it for what it was and didn't allow it to sway me. I'm sorry you're disappointed, Andrew. I truly am, but this is my decision and it's final. You know what? He said after a moment, his tone hardening. Keep your stupid beach house. We'll go to Hawaii instead. Jessica's parents already offered to pay for it anyway. That sounds like a wonderful alternative, I replied sincerely. I hope you both have a lovely honeymoon. Oh, and just so you know, Andrew added, venom seeping into his words, when Jessica and I have children, don't expect to be involved in their lives. You've made your priorities clear, and we'll be making ours clear too. The threat hit exactly as intended, piercing straight to my heart. The thought of grandchildren I might never know brought tears to my eyes. But even through that pain, I recognized the manipulation for what it was. I hope you'll reconsider that position when the time comes, I said, my voice steady despite my tears. But that will be your choice to make, just as this was mine. Jessica's voice came through again, apparently on speakerphone now. Trust me, Naomi, you won't be meeting any grandchildren of ours, not after this stunt, and Andrew won't be calling you anymore either. Consider this relationship terminated. The finality in her voice sent a chill through me, but I refused to engage with her ultimatum. Andrew, I said instead, I love you. I always have, and I always will. When you're ready to build a relationship based on mutual respect, I'll be here. Whatever, Mom, he replied dismissively. I've got to go. We have actual honeymoon plans to make now. The line went dead. I sat motionless for several minutes, letting the tears flow freely. The pain was immense, a mother's worst nightmare realized in that threat about future grandchildren. But beneath the pain was something unexpected, a sense of integrity, of standing firm in my own truth, despite the cost. For decades, I had defined myself primarily as Andrew's mother, measuring my worth by his happiness and success. Now faced with the possibility of losing that identity altogether, I would need to rediscover who Naomi Reynolds was beyond her role as a mother. It was terrifying, but also strangely liberating. At 56 years old, I was being forced to reinvent myself once again, just as I had after Thomas left us when Andrew was 3. I had risen to that challenge then. I would rise to this one now. Over the next few months, I focused on rebuilding my life without Andrew at its center. I expanded my real estate business, hiring 2 new agents and taking on properties in areas I had previously avoided because they would require too much travel time away from home. I joined a support group for parents estranged from adult children, finding solace in the stories of others navigating similar painful journeys. I enrolled in a photography class I had always been interested in, but never made time for learning to capture the beauty of coastal landscapes. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones, saying yes to dinner invitations and weekend trips I might have declined before in case Andrew wanted to visit. The pain didn't disappear. There were still moments when I would see a young family on the street and feel the sharp sting of loss, still nights when I would lie awake wondering if I had made the right decision. But those moments became less frequent as I built a fuller life for myself. 3 months after our last conversation, I received an unexpected text from Andrew. The house in Malibu looks different. Did the new tenants change things? I realized he must have driven by, perhaps hoping to catch a glimpse of what he had lost. I responded simply, The Chens have made it their own. They're very happy there." He didn't reply. Another 2 months passed without contact. Then on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in November, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Andrew was standing there alone, looking uncomfortable and slightly disheveled. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice lacking the confidence I was accustomed to hearing. I nodded and stepped aside, my heart racing with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Andrew entered hesitantly, glancing around as if my living room might have changed as much as our relationship had. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, falling back on the social niceties that make difficult conversations more manageable. "Sure," he said, following me to the kitchen. As I filled the kettle and gathered mugs, Andrew leaned against the counter, his posture tense. "Jessica and I are having problems," he finally said. I kept my expression neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that. Marriage can be challenging." "She's not who I thought she was." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Or maybe she is, and I just didn't want to see it." I placed a mug of tea in front of him, waiting for him to continue. "She's been pressuring me to ask her father for a job at his firm in New York. She says my career is stagnating in San Francisco." He made air quotes around the word. "But I like my job. I've built something here." "And what do you want?" I asked. Andrew looked surprised by the question, as if he hadn't considered his own desires as separate from Jessica's expectations. "I don't want to move to New York," he said slowly. "I don't want to work for her father, and I don't want to keep pretending that cutting you out of our lives was my idea." He met my eyes directly. "It wasn't, Mom. Jessica insisted that you were too involved, that you would interfere with our marriage. She said excluding you from the wedding would set the right tone for our boundaries going forward." "And you agreed," I stated simply, not as an accusation, but as an acknowledgement of fact. He nodded, looking down at his untouched tea. "I was wrong. I see that now." The admission hung in the air between us, fragile and significant. I wanted to rush forward to embrace him and tell him all was forgiven, to slip back into the comfortable patterns of our old relationship. But I knew we needed to build something new, something healthier for both of us. "I appreciate you saying that, Andrew. It means a lot to me." "I miss you, Mom," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I miss talking to you about work and getting your advice. I miss your lasagna and your terrible jokes. I even miss your lectures about saving for retirement." I smiled at that. "My financial advice is solid and you know it?" A ghost of his old grin flashed across his face. "Yeah, it is." The smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. "I don't know what happens next. With Jessica with us, everything's complicated now." "Life usually is," I agreed. "But you don't have to figure it all out today. And you don't have to figure it out alone." Andrew looked at me with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Does that mean, are we okay?" I considered his question carefully before answering. "We're not where we were, and we might never be. Too much has happened. But we can build something new, something based on mutual respect and clearer boundaries. I'd like that very much." He nodded slowly. "Me too." We talked for hours that afternoon, having the honest conversation we should have had months or even years earlier. Andrew shared his struggles in the marriage, his growing realization that Jessica's controlling behavior extended beyond her issues with me. I listened without judgment, offering support, without telling him what to do. When he finally left, promising to call the following weekend, I felt cautiously optimistic. Our relationship had been profoundly damaged, but not beyond repair. The journey back to each other would be long and sometimes difficult, but we had taken the crucial first step. As I closed the door behind him, I realized that the painful lesson I had tried to teach Andrew through my wedding gift had ultimately taught me something equally valuable, that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing your own dignity. that setting boundaries isn't the opposite of love, but often its highest expression, and that sometimes the bravest thing a mother can do is to stand firm in her own worth, even when it breaks her heart to do so. It's been nearly a year since that rainy afternoon when Andrew showed up at my door, setting us on the path to rebuilding our relationship. The journey hasn't been easy or straightforward, but it has been worth every difficult conversation, every moment of vulnerability, every careful step forward. In those early weeks after our reconciliation, we proceeded cautiously. Our phone calls were somewhat formal at first, both of us afraid of saying the wrong thing and reopening old wounds. But gradually, the natural warmth and ease that had always characterized our relationship began to return like spring slowly thawing frozen ground. Andrew's marriage to Jessica continued to deteriorate. 3 months after our reconnection, he called to tell me they were separating. "She gave me an ultimatum," he explained. "Either I cut you out of my life completely again, or she would file for divorce. She didn't expect me to choose you." "I'm sorry it came to that," I said, and I truly was. No matter my feelings about Jessica, I had never wanted my son to experience the pain of a failed marriage. "I'm not," Andrew replied with surprising conviction. "This past year has been a wake-up call, Mom. Jessica didn't just want to separate me from you. She wanted to control every aspect of my life. What I wore, who I spent time with, how I did my job. Nothing was ever good enough unless it was her idea." The divorce proceedings were mercifully quick, as the marriage had been short and there were no children involved. Jessica moved back to New York to work for her father's company, while Andrew remained in San Francisco, rebuilding his life and rediscovering himself. As for me, I continued the journey of self-rediscovery I had begun during our estrangement. I sold my primary residence and bought a smaller, more modern home closer to the heart of the city. I cut back my hours at the real estate agency, hiring a promising young agent to take over some of my responsibilities while I mentored her. This gave me more time for travel photography and deepening friendships, both old and new. The Malibu house remained rented to the Chen family, who had renewed their lease for a second year. Their Christmas card showing their children building sandcastles on the beach that had once been Andrew's playground holds a place of honor on my refrigerator. There's something healing about knowing that new memories are being created in that special place. Andrew and I now meet for dinner every other week. During one of these dinners about 6 months after our reconciliation, he asked a question that caught me off guard. "Do you regret it, Mom, renting out the beach house when I asked to use it?" I considered his question carefully. "No," I finally answered. "It was painful for both of us, but it was necessary. Sometimes love requires difficult choices." He nodded thoughtfully. "I was so angry at first, but looking back, I think it was the wake-up call I needed. No one had ever really said no to me before, especially not you." "I said no to you plenty of times when you were younger," I protested with a smile. "Remember when you wanted to drop out of college to become a professional surfer?" Andrew laughed. "Okay, fair point. But as an adult, I guess I was used to getting my way, especially with you. When you stood your ground about the house, it forced me to look at how I was treating you, how Jessica was influencing me, how entitled I'd become." His insight touched me deeply. The decision that had caused me so much anguish had ultimately served its purpose, not as punishment, but as a catalyst for growth and self-awareness. In the months that followed, our relationship continued to evolve into something new and healthier. Andrew began setting better boundaries in other relationships too, reconnecting with friends Jessica had discouraged him from pursuing interests she had dismissed as unimportant. As for me, I learned to relate to my adult son as a separate individual rather than an extension of myself. I became more mindful about offering advice only when asked about respecting his independence while remaining emotionally available. I discovered that loving him without trying to manage his life created space for a deeper, more authentic connection. The support group I had joined during our estrangement continued to be a valuable resource, though my role gradually shifted from seeking help to offering it to others still in the acute stages of family rupture. Sharing my story, including the painful decision to rent out the Malibu house rather than allow myself to be taken for granted, seemed to provide hope to parents facing similar challenges. Last month, something unexpected happened. Andrew came to dinner with a brochure for a beachfront resort in Kauai. "I'm planning a trip in January," he explained, sliding the brochure across the table. "2 weeks. I was wondering if you'd consider coming for part of it. Maybe the first week." I was touched by the invitation, but hesitant. "Are you sure that's your vacation time? You don't need your mother tagging along." "I'm sure," he said firmly. "We never did get to take that trip to Hawaii we talked about when I graduated, and I'd like to make some new memories with you. Good ones to replace some of the painful ones from last year." So next month, I'll be joining Andrew in Kauai. We'll hike the Napali coast, take a sunset catamaran cruise, and simply enjoy each other's company in one of the most beautiful places on Earth. It won't be the Malibu house, but perhaps it will be the beginning of a new tradition, a new chapter in our story. The pain of being excluded from Andrew's wedding will always be part of our history, a scar that has healed but never completely vanished. The fear of missing future milestones, including those potential grandchildren Jessica once threatened to keep from me, has diminished but not disappeared entirely. Life offers no guarantees about what tomorrow may bring. But I've learned that while we can't control the actions of others, even those we love most deeply, we can control our own responses. We can choose to stand in our truth with dignity. We can set boundaries that protect our self-respect while keeping our hearts open to reconciliation. We can discover sometimes to our own surprise that we are stronger and more resilient than we ever imagined. If you're facing a similar situation with a loved one who has taken your devotion for granted, remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential. Sometimes the most loving gift you can give someone is the opportunity to experience the consequences of their choices. And sometimes the most important person to show love and respect to is yourself. I hope my story has offered some comfort or insight if you're navigating your own challenging family dynamics. I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your own dignity in a relationship? How did you handle it, and what was the outcome? Please like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and growth, and share it with anyone who might need to hear this message today. Remember, you're stronger than you know, and you're never alone in these struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey.